We've got 8 more days till the election, and in the debates and in a lot of the conversation, there's been very little talk about technology. Is that good or bad? How should Silicon Valley be voting in the election? And what kind of impact should Silicon Valley have on the election? Now, one guy who knows about DC and the Valley, the guy we always go to when it comes to politics, is my old friend Larry Downs. Larry is actually talking to us from Washington, DC. Larry, welcome again to Techcrunch TV.
Thank you, Andrew. Nice to be back.
So, Larry, you have a blog. I don't know why you don't blog for Techcrunch, but you do blog for Forbes, and you had a very interesting blog a couple of weeks ago on Forbes called Memo to Congress, Stop Trying to Fix Silicon Valley. What was your point?
Well, I think that, when we have election cycles like this, we often get the candidates passing through Silicon Valley, and always the question is, what can we do to make you more successful? And our message, generally speaking, is don't do more, do less. We're doing fine on our own. What we really need is not big stimulus or investments or research, and those things help. But what we really, really need from governments, not just Washington, is stay out of the way. You're slow, we're fast. It's just going to be a bad scene if you try to help us.
But is that something that one or both parties are actually practicing? They're not really making technology a core issue in this election.
No, not at all. In fact, it's not even on the radar. And of course, as you say, I'm here in Washington, and with the election so close, you'd think that that would be a discussion. But the truth is, no one has talked about technology in this election, which is not unusual. And frankly, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because often when they talk about technology, it's things like new privacy regulations or new copyright regulations or new patent regulations. It's the kinds of things that, generally speaking, are dangerous. So the less they say about us, I guess, the best.
I'm surprised, Larry, that you're actually allowed to be in Washington, D.C., since you seem to be against any kind of legislation.
Well,
do you want to close the town down? Would that be best for Silicon Valley?
Well, no. I mean, look, government's important. I'm not a crazy libertarian. I just, when it comes to fast-changing technologies, things like the internet, these are technologies that just are very, very poor fit for the kind of slow-moving, deliberate, micromanaging kind of regulation, which may work perfectly well in other industries or in other areas. I'm not saying, regulation is a bad thing overall. Really, my message to Washington is, when there's a lot going on and things are changing quickly, that's not a good fit for government as we know it. Leave it to essentially the market, leave it to the engineers. That's been working just fine. Not perfect, but it's working better than everything else. So just leave it alone, let it do its own thing.
Isn't it pretty weird, though, that this is an election about how to make America innovative again, and the center of innovation in this country is Silicon Valley, and yet there's no discussion of the way in which Silicon Valley can help make America more competitive?
I do find it weird. Of course, I'm not a political activist, or I'm not a partisan in any sense in these things. I'm surprised. Of course, I'm not the strategist for either campaign, so I don't understand, how they're formulating their message. But yes, if I was running for office, it would be on the innovation platform, and I would certainly be touting Silicon Valley and the way it gets things done, and the way it generates value, the way it generates wealth, the way it generates social improvement. And you're right, no one is doing that. I have no idea why.
You think it's fair to say that Silicon Valley's fallen out of love with Obama, but they haven't really fallen into the arms of Romney either?
Yeah, obviously it's a very broad statement, but I would say, generally speaking, that's right. I think there was a lot of expectation around the Obama presidency that it would be one that was very sensitive to innovation and job creation, the way Silicon Valley does it. And it's not so much that the administration has done terrible things, though they've done some things that we don't like, but it's more what they haven't done. There was a dinner, I think, a couple of years ago. Steve Jobs was still alive, that's how I know it, at the home of John Doerr, who's one of the leading venture capitalists in Silicon Valley. President Obama came to dinner, and he met with the CEOs of Oracle and Apple and Microsoft and all the sort of leading tech companies. And I wasn't at this dinner, but I spoke to several people who were. They had a very short list of things they said would really help. Things like, changing our immigration policy so we don't kick out, engineers who finish their PhDs in our great universities and then we send them home to compete with us because we won't let them have H-1B visas. Simple things like that that didn't require any taxpayer expense. It was a very short list, and if you look at that list and you look at what the administration has done in 4 years, none of those things have been done.
Do you envisage there be much difference between an Obama or a Romney administration when it comes to tech over the next 4 years?
I don't. No, I don't see. Again, all we have to go on is what the candidates and their campaigns have said to us in the course of the last. Well, in the case of the Republicans, there's been a whole year of primaries before the election, but certainly since the conventions and at the conventions, neither of them told us anything about how they would stimulate innovation, how they would support the growth that Silicon Valley delivers. So based on that, and that's all I've got to go on. I don't see any reason to think either will do anything dramatically different than what's been happening up till now.
These guys are too busy chasing terrorists in Afghanistan, right?
Or each other's misstatements or misquotes, yeah.
Right. So what are the big issues, Larry, in your mind? How critical, for example, is spectrum policy going to be over the next couple of years in order to generate innovation in our digital economy?
Yeah, so I mean, certainly that's on my top 5, and I'd say my top 5 would be, let's make sure this is 5, but I would say immigration policy, as I mentioned, the tax problem we have where you can't repatriate foreign earned income into the United States, so we encourage people to keep it outside the United States and invest it there, which makes no sense. Spectrum policy, where we have this spectrum crunch, as we've been talking about for years. We need more spectrum. The mobile world is growing at leaps and bounds. And the FCC has been extremely slow in finding ways to get more spectrum out there. Patent reform, we all know, even consumers now understand that we've been so generous with our patents, particularly in the mobile space and in terms of software and business methods, that it's causing such incredible litigation problems that we don't know if we can kind of continue without a full seizure. That's 4. I'll stop at 4. Right? So those are 4 that I would be most concerned with.
And of those 4, which do you think is the most critical to address to guarantee American competitiveness in the digital economy? Would it be spectrum?
Yes, certainly. That's been more my focus. So it may be I've just got a skewed view, but we already know that. Given the growth we've got in terms of usage of our mobile networks, that's of course a good thing. But if we compare that to available bandwidth and what's coming online, there's really not much math that needs to be done to realize that we're going to hit a wall within the next 3 years if we don't free up some more spectrum for consumers to use.
And this issue of spectrum is of course a no-brainer for the Techcrunch audience. So for startup entrepreneurs who want to guarantee more spectrum, for their products, for their apps, for their platforms, what should they be doing? Should they be putting pressure on the FCC?
They should be putting pressure on the FCC, but actually more than that, they should be putting pressure on the White House. The most promising source of underutilized, in some cases unused spectrum in this country is the federal government itself. They control vast amounts of really valuable bandwidth. And they don't do much with it. The systems they've got are old and inefficient, don't need to be there anymore. Some cases they're just warehousing the spectrum. The president issued an executive order now 2 years ago ordering federal agencies to identify a very large amount of spectrum that they could give up and then turn over to the market to be auctioned for consumer use. Up to this point, nothing has happened. Some months ago, the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology issued a report that said, oh, actually, we don't need to free up any spectrum. We can just share it between the federal government and commercial users. That's completely impractical from a technical standpoint, but more to the point, it set the discussion back now by a couple of years. So if anybody in your audience wants to do the most valuable thing to solve this problem, it would be go back to the White House and say, that executive order was the right thing to do. start enforcing it, and let's stop talking about nonsense like sharing spectrum with the federal government. Let's free it up.
Well, there you have it. Larry Downs says, give us back our spectrum. Larry, as always, a pleasure, and I will look forward to having you on the show after next week when we know who actually is going to be the new president. Thanks again, Larry, and best of luck with everything.
Thank you, Andrew. See you soon.